when Hashem appeared to Moshe in the burning bush. That was when Moshe was a shepherd. He was in Midian, and he was chasing that lone sheep that ran away. And that's when Hashem appeared to him in the, or at least, the divine spirit appeared to him from the burning bush, to represent that God is with the people in the suffering. But one of the things that it says over there, we don't have the text here in front of us, so I'm just recapping verbally. But one of the things it said over there is that Hashem revealed himself, and Moshe immediately didn't want to look at as soon as he realizes the divine presence that is in the bush, he did not want to look. It says he covered his eyes, and it says that he looked away. He didn't want to, he didn't want to connect, or at least visually connect, with the divine spirit that was resting within the burning bush. And Hashem had to finally get his attention to say, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Come closer, take off your shoes," and then tell him to go to Egypt, to tell Paro to let the Jewish people go. Now, the Medrash and Kabbalah analyze that incident from the burning bush in great detail. And one of the things it mentions, so from a simple perspective, and every situation, especially in the Torah, has a simple understanding. The simple understanding is Moshe was overwhelmed by the divine revelation that was in the bush, and he didn't want to be consumed by it, or it was scary. Here God is revealing himself in the burning bush. That's very understandable. But there's a deeper understanding of what was really happening. And one of the explanations is, and this is more of a Kabbalistic and more of a Hasidic explanation, is the idea of the bush. Why was it a burning bush? Why not a burning tree? Why not a burning? Why does it have to be anything? Hashem could reveal himself as he is, or at least in whatever form he wants to. So the idea of a burning bush is that a bush has thorns, and it's prickly. You ever get caught in a bush? It's painful. We're not talking about the pretty ones that we plant in front of our houses. We're talking about the natural ones in the wild that are usually very prickly and very painful to be caught in. And Hashem's message to Moshe, or the message in the Torah telling us, learning about the burning bush, is that Hashem was communicating that he is with the people in their suffering, and that he is a part of it. In other words, that this is not just some random thing that happened. This is not just some, things just took a turn for the worse, and the Jewish people are now enslaved by the Egyptians. Hashem is part of the whole unraveling of events, and he's in on it. So both to say that he's in on it, suffering with the people, but also let's not forget, and let's be honest, Hashem is the one in charge of the world and controlling the world, and everything that as we're going to see in the text soon, that everything that happens is completely under manipulated and controlled by Hashem. A leaf doesn't fall from a tree without Hashem dictating exactly what should happen. And if Hashem withdrew his divine essence and his divine revelation or divine energy from anything in the world, it would disappear. It would cease to exist. And what Moshe was trying not to look at, and this is the punchline here. So this is what you need to understand. What Moshe was trying to avoid is getting comfortable with the idea that God is okay with what's happening. I'm going to say that again. Moshe was not willing to accept and not willing to face the reality that Hashem is part of this suffering that's happening, and that Hashem is allowing it to happen. On a very practical note, and I don't want to keep on going back to it, but we all know it's like living in our minds, the last 4 or 5 months. But it's there, is wondering, how could Hashem let this happen? How could Hashem actively be protecting the Jewish people at the same time allowing this to happen? How does Hashem run a world where this could happen? The same goes for any tragedy. The same goes for the Holocaust. The same goes for any other horrific event or natural disaster or war, anything that happens in the world that's bad and painful and difficult. It's always mind-boggling. How is this Hashem's world? Even though we say, yes, we're in exile and the divine energy is withdrawn, we're hidden, and we want Mashiach, and we want it all to end, Hashem is still controlling the world. That's the fact. And if that's the case, how is this happening? And what Moshe was trying to avoid, he wasn't denying that it's the case, but he did not want to face the facts. Sometimes when we have an uncomfortable situation, many of us have a coping mechanism where we just avoid the subject. I know this for myself, that when I see something that I don't like, or there's bad news or whatever, I just try not to. I try to pretend it's like, it's not happening. Like, for the first few weeks after October 7th, I didn't want to see any pictures. I didn't want to see any news. I just didn't want. I wanted to. This is not necessarily a good thing. I'm just telling you the facts. Is I almost wanted to pretend subconsciously that this is not happening, as a coping mechanism. The same goes for other challenges that we face. That some people have that way of coping. I'm not saying it's a good way. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm not a therapist. Some of us, like to face it head on and deal with it, and very possibly that's the right way. But from a simple understanding of what Moshe was trying to avoid is facing the fact, or getting comfortable with the fact, that Hashem is involved and complicit in the suffering that's happening to the Jewish people. Why is this important, and why are we talking about this if we're already in the parsha of Ki Sisa? So in this parsha, what happens is the Jewish people at 49 days, 40 days, not 49 days, 40 days after they receive the Torah and they hear Hashem come down to the mountain and say, I am the one I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. And of course comes the second commandment, which is do not have any other gods. And what do? 49 days later, I'm sorry, I keep on saying that. 40 days later, when they miscalculated the day that Moshe was supposed to come back, they decided to find a replacement for Moshe. They weren't replacing God. It's important to understand their golden calf was not meant to be God. It was meant to be a replacement of Moshe, to be their intermediary between them and God, which that is still idol worship. In other words, they weren't saying God doesn't exist. They weren't saying this golden calf is God. They were saying this golden calf is now our way of connecting with God, which is against the Torah, which is considered idol worship. So now they do this horrific sin, or terrible sin. So Moshe is stuck because Hashem is saying that he's going to destroy the Jewish people because they don't deserve to be his people anymore. And Hashem tells Moshe, I'm going to start a new nation from you. Your children, your family will be the new nation, because the tribe of Levi did not participate in the golden calf, so therefore they would be the ones to start the new Jewish people. And what did Moshe say? As we know, Moshe said, forgive the people, and if you don't, erase me from your book, erase me from your Torah. I want no part of your Torah. And it was through this that Moshe saved the Jewish people, and there's a lot more to talk about on that subject, but that's not what this class is about. What we are going to talk about is what happened afterwards. Moshe says to Hashem, Hareini na'es kvodecha, show me your glory, I want to see you. So now, let's go back to the burning bush for a second. Back to the burning bush when Hashem was trying to reveal himself to Moshe. Moshe didn't want to see Hashem. And now Moshe is saying to Hashem, I want to see you. And the Medrash, and Rashi brings out, the Medrash says that Hashem's response was, no, you had your chance. I was going to reveal myself to you at the burning bush, but you didn't want to look. And what does the Medrash say Hashem was going to reveal to him? Hashem was going to reveal everything to Moshe. He would see the future. He would see everything that is encompassed with creation of the world. In that moment, he would know everything about Hashem's relationship with the world and what's going to happen at any moment, all the way up to coming a Mashiach, even though Hashem eventually showed him that at the end before he passed away. But Hashem was willing to show him everything, to the point where he would have an understanding of the divine presence in a way that no other human being could possibly have. So now Moshe is coming back to Hashem and saying, I want to see you. So Hashem's response was not as one would expect, but we're going to get there in a second. Let's start with a few puzzling statements, and we're going to use that as a build-up to get to the story at hand of Hashem revealing himself to Moshe. So we have a law from the Talmud, it's in the Code of Jewish Law as well, that in the morning we have a biblical commandment to read the Shema. Every person, man, woman, we have a biblical commandment that in the morning, in the first 3 hours of the day, we should say the Shema, biblically. And we also have a commandment that we should say the Shema at night, after nightfall. That's a biblical commandment, and we say it in davening. But if someone is not ready to daven or not davening in the first 3 hours, So they should say the Shema before davening and just say it in the first 3 hours as soon as they wake up. And many people actually have alarms. Let's say they go to sleep. Let's say they arrive from a trip at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. They set an alarm to make sure they wake up within the first 3 hours of the day just to say the Shema and then go back to sleep. But the point is, there's a mitzvah to say the Shema in the first 3 hours of sunlight. Now, what the Gemara is saying here is that if you say Shema without tefillin, it's as if you are bearing false testimony against themselves, because you're basically saying the Shema. What is the Shema? That Hashem is the first verse. Hashem is one. But then, of course, it's you should love Hashem and with all your might, with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. And then, what does it say? We should teach our children. But then after that, we should put on tefillin and we should have a mezuzah. So if we're talking about putting on tefillin and we're not wearing tefillin, then we're bearing false testimony against ourselves. Here's another one. Because the Shema includes the 3 sections of Shema. The first section, which is the V'ahavta, and there's the V'hayam Shema, and then there's the last section, which talks about the tzitzit. So a similar halacha exists, similar law exists, where it says that if you recite the Shema without tzitzis, it's also bearing false witness against himself. Now, this obviously only refers to a male, because a female is not obligated to put on tefillin or wear tzitzis, as we're going to understand even better in the next few texts. The point is that we have to say Shema with tefillin and tzitzis. Now, just as a side note, if one is saying Shema before, let's say somebody, like I mentioned, let's say somebody is not davening shachars, the morning prayers in the first 3 hours of the day, so they should say the Shema separately, so they do not need to put on tefillin to say the Shema, because they are going to put on tefillin eventually, so they're not, in other words, it's part of their routine, so it's not like they're bearing false witness. Right now I'm saying the Shema because it's the time, but soon I'll put on tefillin and I'm going to say it again. Tzitzis, on the other hand, we always have to wear tzitzis, biblically by day, rabbinically by night. So tzitzis is something we always have to wear, and that's very important. Question is why? Okay, so the mitzvah is that we need to recite the Shema, understand. But why do we have to, and we have to verbalize the words, by the way, we can't just say it with our eyes. It's very important to understand that when it comes to prayer, at least to accomplish the mitzvah, we actually have to verbalize the words of the Shema in order to fulfill the mitzvah. But why do we have to be wearing tefillin or tzitzis? Why is that related? And we're not going to go too much into the mitzvah itself, but into what the mitzvah represents. So let us go on. I'm going to skip this because we just explained that. Now I'm going to go on to our parsha, what we were talking about until now. So this is where this is where Moshe says to Hashem, don't forget, this is right after the whole golden calf saga, after the whole disaster that took place, but also in our parsha. So Moshe says, show me your glory. I want to see you. Now take a look at verse 19 and 20. Hashem says, I will cause all my goodness to pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of Hashem before you. I'll be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I'll be compassionate to whom I'll be compassionate. So he wasn't giving him a clear answer, at least from the text. And then what did Hashem say? You cannot see my presence, for no human can see my presence and live. In other words, I offered you this chance, and you did not accept it. Now, that request is withdrawn. But if this is the case, if Hashem is saying that you can't see my presence and live, how is he going to show him his presence in the burning bush? So we're going to get to that. But what did Hashem wasn't rejecting the request outright. Hashem goes on to say, verse 21, and Hashem said, behold, there is a place with me, and you shall set yourself on the rock, a certain place. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft by the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I pass by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face you shall not see. So Rashi says, so that's the text. Rashi says, let's make sure we have the Rashi here. So Rashi says like this. Hashem says, I will cause the time has come for you to see some of my glory, that I will permit you to see because I want and need to teach you the order of prayer. So I'm not rejecting your request because I need to teach you how to pray, how to daven. So what's the way for me to do that? I'll proclaim the name of Hashem before you to teach you the procedure for begging for compassion, of how to ask for forgiveness. Even if the merit of the patriarchs is depleted, you will see me enwrapped in talis and proclaiming the 13 attributes you should teach the Jewish people to do the same. By mentioning before me the words compassionate and gracious, they will be answered, for my compassion never abates. And you will see my back, and Rashi says he showed him the knot of the tefillin. So let's unpack this for a minute. Moshe didn't ask for instructions how to pray. So why is Hashem saying, I'm going to teach you how to pray? Like there's a total broken telephone over here. Moshe is saying, I want to see your glory. And Hashem is saying, I want to teach you how to pray. Two different conversations. And what is up with the compassion? In other words, to call Hashem compassionate or to ask for forgiveness. And look in the prayer itself, what is Hashem trying to teach us? And what is the idea of not seeing Hashem's face, but it's okay to see Hashem's back? And what's the idea of the knot of the tefillin? So let's break this down in specifics. Why was Moshe asking Hashem to see him all of a sudden? Okay, Moshe was this relationship has been going on since the burning bush. Lots of conversation between Moshe and Hashem, all the way from all of his challenges in facing Paro to the plagues, to leaving Egypt, splitting of the sea, the manna falling from heaven, the Miriam's well of water, and then of course the giving of the Torah, which was the highlight. So and not only that, during the first 40 days that he was up there, he was having conversations with Hashem. In fact, the Medrash tells us amazing stories of what would happen. Just an example, it says that when Moshe was up there in the 40 days, and Hashem was teaching Moshe the Torah and giving Moshe the Torah, the angels intercepted him and said, how are you giving the flesh and blood, a human being, the Torah? And it says that these angels were not the regular angels. There's 3 levels of angels that we talked about. These were the seraphim. These were the angels of the highest spiritual order, the level of from the world of Bria, which is like the most refined spiritual world of creation. That these angels were scary. It says that they appeared to Moshe as gigantic fiery beings, and they scared him. And Hashem turns to Moshe and says, answer them. Don't be scared, answer them. So Moshe walked, this is what the Medrash says. I don't know exactly how this plays out in spiritual worlds, but Moshe walked over to the throne of Hashem, and only then was he comfortable enough to answer, and he said, let's look at what the Torah says. The Torah says, honor your parents. Do you have parents? The Torah says, don't steal. Do you have a desire to steal? And so on and so forth. And the angels couldn't answer him, and then Moshe, won that argument. But the point is that they've had a relationship here. So what was Moshe saying by, I want to see you? Like, where's this coming from? So the answer is because now that Moshe succeeded in getting forgiveness for the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf, Moshe wanted to understand, how do we do that? How do we do that again? You ever figure something out really cool? Like whether, let's say you're a mathematician and you come to a great equation, or you're an engineer and you figure something out. So you always want to know how you got there. Like, I want to make sure you write down the details of how you figured this out. So Moshe accomplished something amazing, because up until now, the sin of idol worship was unforgivable. And now Moshe achieved forgiveness for the Jewish people. And Moshe wanted to know, how is this done? Because it's going to happen again. He knew that this is going to happen again. He knew that it's going to happen in the land of Israel. He knew it's going to happen outside of the land of Israel. So Moshe wanted to know, what is the secret of obtaining forgiveness the way I just obtained forgiveness? And that's why Hashem answered him by saying, I'm going to teach you I'm going to reveal to you the 13 attributes of mercy, which when you say these words, you're going to appeal to the attribute of mercy, which we talked about last week. I believe we did. Or I'm sorry, that was on Shabbat. But we'll leave it at that. You'll appeal to Hashem's attribute of mercy, and you'll bring out forgiveness. And by the way, the 13 attributes of mercy is the famous verse that we say, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum L'Chanun. We sing it. I'm not going to sing it because I'm a terrible voice, but we on Yom Kippur we sing it a ton of times. But we also say it every day. Every day that we recite Tachnun, we say it twice. And of course, we say it many, many times on Yom Kippur. We say it on a fast day because it's such a powerful verse that Hashem taught Moshe in revealing to him the 13 attributes of mercy and how to achieve forgiveness. So that's what Hashem was communicating to Moshe. Now, what is the back of the tefillin? What is the back? So what is the front versus the back? So that I'm not going to, and what is the knot of the tefillin? That I'm not going to answer yet. We're going to go further. Okay, so Hashem teaches Moshe how to pray. And this is what we just talked about. So skipping this. So now let's go on to a subject. We're going to go on a bit of a roundabout subject to get to our answers, to get to our lesson. The general theme here is understanding that Jewish people are believers, the children of believers, which means that, what's the idea of children of believers? It means that our belief in Hashem is non-negotiable, and it's not something that we accomplish. It's imbued within us. It's part of us. It's part of our DNA. Our DNA is that we believe in Hashem, and that there's nothing that can get in between that belief and that connection that we have with Hashem. That is a given. That is something that we say, we believe, and that's why even if somebody's non-observant and somebody doesn't have any revealed, connection to their Jewish heritage, or at least I say revealed because it appears so. Nevertheless, deep down they have that attribute of belief and connection with Hashem. Now that we said that, let's read this. This is from the Alter Rebbe in the second section of Tanya. And here the Alter Rebbe gives us an example of Hashem's control of the world. And this over here is at the core foundation of Chassidus, the core foundation of Kabbalah. This is the core foundation of Jewish belief. And this is why idol worship is so bad. So here goes. If the creative force, in other words, if God, if Hashem, were to depart even for an instant, God forbid, all the heavens would become absolute nothingness. And it would be as though they had never existed at all. Exactly as before God uttered the words of let there be a firmament, let there be heaven. The same is true with all the created beings in the upper worlds, the lower worlds, and even on the physical earth, all the way down completely all the way down to completely inanimate matter. If the creative force of the words of Hashem used to originally create the world during the 6 days of creation were to depart from it, but for an instant, God forbid, the world would revert to absolute nothingness exactly as it was before the 6 days of creation. This, by the way, is why we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that Hashem is God, but also Hashem is one. Hashem is one with the world. Not that Hashem is the only God. That we believe anyways. But Hashem is the world, and the world is Hashem. And this is, by the way, why a Jew is not allowed to believe in a partner. A Jew is not allowed to believe that the sun has a say in if it should shine or not. The sun is just like an axe and a hammer in the hand of the stonemason. The sun is doing exactly what Hashem told it to do. The same goes for every other creation. This is why we can never say that a human being has decision power of their own as if they're some kind of partner to Hashem. That is a blasphemy, or that is considered idol worship to a Jew. A non-Jew is allowed to believe that because they don't have this commandment of believing that Hashem is everything. They just have to believe in God. But for a Jew is expected to go above and beyond and believe that Hashem is everything, that there is nothing but Hashem. This is it's a tall order, because that means you're believing that everything that happens in the world and everything that happens to you in the world is all by the hand of Hashem. So having said this, and this is something the Jewish people knew. This is something the Jewish people knew even better than us. It says that they're the Dor Dea. They were the nation of intellectuals. They knew Kabbalah. They knew Torah. They knew creation better than we can even dream of knowing. So they knew all this. So if that's the case, how did they come to such a sin of serving the golden calf? Because once again, the golden calf, they weren't trying to say the golden calf was God. They were trying to say the golden calf is God's, God's partner, and they gave the golden calf credit for some sort of, like, having some sort of power, and that's idol worship. Because it's not that you're denying God, but you're adding something to God, and you're basically negating the fact that God is everything. So if that's the case, how is it possible that the Jewish people made such a mistake and such a big sin? Sorry, let's read that text here. And then the Rebbe asks this question: how is it possible that a Jew behaves in a way that is contrary to what we know is absolutely true? If we're believers, the children of believers, and it's imbued within us, how is it possible to make such a big blunder? So the answer is that one does indeed know the truth, but they momentarily forget it. Okay? So I want to be blunt about life in general. So we all want to live a certain way. We all have values and morals and ethics and things that we feel very strongly about. But we're human. And by human, that means that just because we have a strong feeling about a moral and an ethic that we want to live by and values that we want to live by doesn't mean that we're always going to practice and live up to those expectations. That's why practice what you preach is a very difficult thing to do. Because you could preach it, because you could intellectually explain it and even passionately stand for it. But in reality, it could be very difficult. The famous story of Aristotle, who always preached morals and ethics, and he was caught doing something unethical. And he said that those few moments of lust was not me. It was some other power that was just, in control of me. But on that note, you have many people who actually love their spouse. They're in a marriage, or they're in a relationship where they love their spouse. And God forbid, they might do something where they step out of their marriage. And it's not necessarily meaning they don't love their spouse. It's just that they allowed the lust, or they allowed their desires to overtake them, and they did not fight it enough. So it wasn't saying they don't love their spouse. It was allowing a foreign force, or a foreign feeling, or passion to overtake them, and they didn't overcome it and fight it. So in this case, the Jewish people knew that God is everything. They knew everything that we just read, much better than we did. But they also had this desire. Don't forget, the desire for idol worship was way more than the lust now is for money and for other things. The sages prayed in the beginning of the time of the Second Temple that it should be taken away because it's too hard to overcome it. But the people that did live during the time of the lust for idol worship described it as being one of the most difficult challenges to overcome. So they had this desire for having a Moshe, having a golden calf, and they basically momentarily forgot what their real allegiance was to. The same goes for every mistake that we make. Every time we do something we're not supposed to, every time we upset somebody or we all have examples in our own lives with our own relationships and our own friends, our professional relationships, whatever it is. We all have times that we don't live up to the expectation that we want for ourselves. It's part of being human. Not necessarily it's okay, but it's part of being human, and it's our job to try to strengthen ourselves and try to become better and try to improve and try to fix our mistakes. But the point is that it happens. So now that it happens, what's the antidote when it comes to our relationship with Hashem? What's the antidote to not have a momentary lapse where we forget what our obligation is, and how do we overcome the desires and lusts and passions that might overtake us, that might try to get us to do something that we're not supposed to. I'm going to actually, I'll leave this text on the screen. It's not a text from one of the sages, but it's a text explaining that the truth is I'm actually someone that forgets people's names a lot. It's very bad. I call people by the wrong name. Sometimes I'm terrible at that. And according to this I think it's a psychologist. Let's see what it's, sorry. I think it's a psychologist, but basically he says that we forget names because the names of a person isn't that important to us. In other words, we chose basically subconsciously chose not to remember their name because it wasn't important to us. And it's very possibly true. I'm sure some people have better memories than others, but the point is, if something's very, very important to you, we don't forget it. But back to our question: what's the antidote to ensuring the relationship with Hashem doesn't have a momentary lapse? How do we strengthen ourselves? Because just because we're human, just because it happens, doesn't mean we should be comfortable with it and okay with it. After the fact, yes, because after the fact, we have to move on. We have to, not let it bring us down. But before the fact, what are we supposed to do to ensure this connection remains steadfast and unbreakable? So now comes the two mitzvahs that we described of tefillin and tzitzis. So what does it say about the tzitzis? That they should be a reminder for you. I'm just paraphrasing the text, but they should be a reminder for you. And you see them, it will remind you of the 613 mitzvos, and you won't go astray. You won't follow your heart, and you won't go after all of the desires of your eyes and everything that might distract you. The tzitzis is a way for you to constantly remain connected and bound to our relationship and commitment that we have to Hashem. And there's a fascinating thing about tzitzis, is the numerical value of tzitzis. I'm going to point to the word here on the screen. The tzaddik is 90. The yud is 10. The tzaddik is 90. And there's a second yud here that is not included, but it's here. There's a yud that's 10, and then the taf is 400. That adds up to 600. Now, I'm sorry, we'll come back to that. We have the tzitzis is a garment, and then we have 4 corners, and we have 5 knots on each corner, and then we have 8 strings. So 600 plus 5 plus 8 is 613. That's how we get to 613 mitzvos, and that's how the tzitzis reminds us. Here you see the tzitzis with the 2 yuds, by the way. So that must have been a mistake in the text. But the numerical value is 600. The 5 knots, the 8 strings add up to 613. Just a little tidbit of how that becomes a reminder for us to remember the mitzvos and to remain connected and not have that momentary lapse. Now, tefillin. What does tefillin do? So it says in the Shema that we read, this is not from the Shema, but this is still one of the explanations, is that it should be to you a sign upon your hand and a reminder between your eyes. So the hand is against your heart, which is your emotions, and a reminder between your eyes is by your brain, which is in your intellect, and that you should connect and bind your intellect and your emotions to Hashem. And remember that Hashem took us out of Egypt and that we are connected and bound to Hashem from that moment, and that everything that we do has to be in line and in connection with what Hashem wants us to do. That is the purpose of tefillin. It connects us to Hashem through a knot that can never be undone. Now, let's read another paragraph about the tefillin, and then we're going to start breaking down the whole concept here. So this is what you're supposed to think about when you put on tefillin. Because when you're putting on the hand tefillin, for those of us who do this, when you're putting on the hand tefillin, so you're not supposed to talk or distract yourself, because when you make the blessing on the hand tefillin, you want that blessing to cover the head tefillin as well. And if you talk or you distract yourself, you have to make a second blessing. So you want to focus and have in mind the following. So the Alter Rebbe writes in the Code of Jew, in his version of the Code of Jewish Law, when putting on tefillin, one should keep in mind that the Holy One, blessed be He, commanded us to write these 4 passages and speak of God's unity and the exodus from Egypt, and to place them on our arm opposite the heart and on the head over the brain. We do this to remember the miracles and wonders that Hashem did for us and that reflect His unity, demonstrating that He has the power and the sovereignty to do as He desires in the upper realms and in the lower realms. One should therefore subjugate his soul, which resides in his brain, to the Holy One, blessed be He, along with the desire, this is important, along with the desires and thoughts of his heart to His service. Thus, by putting on tefillin, he will remember the Creator, blessed be He, and minimize his pleasure seeking. When we say pleasure, we mean things that he's not supposed to do. So the tefillin and the tzitzis become our memory aids to connect us to Hashem, so we don't have that momentary lapse. And that's honestly what we have with all the mitzvahs, all the blessings that we make before we eat, the davening that we do, the lighting the candles, the blessing when we take challah. All of the mitzvahs that we have are all there almost as memory aids. The mezuzah on the door is there as a memory aid to constantly remind us of the connection that we have and the obligation that we have to make this world a divine home for Hashem, where His presence could be revealed and be comfortable. So now, what does this have to do with Hashem showing Himself to Moshe, and what does this have to do with the knot of the tefillin? I'm going to skip this text here, guys. I want to go to our final message. So this is from Shlomo HaMelech, where he says that you should connect. This is talking about tefillin, but also about the general idea of being connected. So what is a knot? A knot takes 2 different entities and brings them together. Okay, so you have a knot that you can take a string, and you have a knot that you can make a knot within one string. But that doesn't change the string. The string is still a string, it's just a little shorter now. A real knot, a useful knot, is when you take 2 different entities and you're knotting one thing to the other. That's really what a knot is. And in the tefillin, there's specifically 2 separate strings that come out of the knot, that 2 separate straps that come out of the knot from the head tefillin, because it's representing the 2 things that are being bound together. So when Hashem was showing Moshe the knot of his tefillin, He was explaining to Moshe not just the 13 attributes of mercy. Here's the secret code to achieve forgiveness and to obtain forgiveness after such a terrible sin of idol worship. It's not just about giving you the keys and the tricks and the and the code words to get to forgiveness, but it's a message. It's a message to show that the knot, the bind, the bind between God and the Jewish people is so deeply connected that it can never be undone. Because if Hashem is wearing a knot of the tefillin, that is something that's never going to come off. That's something that can never be undone. Hashem's knots are impossible to undo. And the reason why there are 13 attributes of mercy, the reason why we have the secret code, the reason why Hashem forgave the Jewish people is because that knot is impossible to break. That connection is so deep, and that connection can never ever be broken, no matter what happens, no matter what we do, no matter what we think we do, and so on and so forth. So that being said, if that's the case, if Hashem's telling us that he has this knot and is connected to us, is bound to us, is tied to us, and it can never be broken, what does it have to do with us? Why we can just have fun? Hashem's taking care of us. So this is the idea of a knot. A knot has to have two willing pieces coming together. In order for a knot to work, there has to be a connection and action of both elements of the knot, of the string. So I'm talking about, let's say, a square knot, where you take two strings and you tie them together. All right, that's what we learned in the Boy Scouts. So to do that, you need to have the action of both sides of both strings. So we can't just rely on Hashem, even though Hashem is promising us that the knot is unbreakable. We have to make sure that we are actively engaged in strengthening that knot. How do we do that? Through the mitzvahs. Through doing what Hashem asked us to do, like tefillin and tzitzis and mezuzah and Torah study and kindness and all the things that Hashem gave us in the Torah, is how we ensure that knot, that bind, that connection is not just there because there's no other choice and it's unbreakable, but because we are active participants in this connection with Hashem. I want to go on to another. This is a piece of the Gemara where he goes on to explain something very important about the mitzvahs, but also about our connection. So the Gemara in general is very cryptic. I'm sorry, this is from the Zohar, but it's also quoted from the Gemara as well. So Rabbi Chia said to Rabbi Yossi, one day I was traveling and I heard and I saw Rabbi Hamnuna Saba explain a certain verse to Rav Acha. When I heard that explanation, I rejoiced and I guarded it and knotted it in the corner of my garment. So I basically used a knot to remind myself of what I learned, so that I should never forget it. So Rabbi Yossi said to him, this is surely a holy explanation that emanated from a source of holy light. In other words, it's a secret of Kabbalah. Fortunate is the generation whose members include those who uphold and support the world. If you tied one knot so that you should remember this explanation, I shall tie 30 or 40 knots so that I should never forget it. By the way, the backstory of this is that when Rabbi Chia heard this explanation, we don't know what it is, but it was a Kabbalistic explanation. It says that all the trees around them burst into flames. That it was such a revelation of godliness and a revelation of knowledge, of secret knowledge, that it impacted the world, or it impacted the physical world around them. And that's why it was something that Rabbi Chia didn't want to forget, and he wanted to make sure that that he was able to remember it. So what's the idea of the knot that he's talking about? Is the knot is just like we have the knot of the tzitzis, the knot of tefillin, and the knot of every mitzvah that we do. Just like that was there to remind him of what he learned, the knot is here to remind us of the obligations that we have to Hashem. Let's just read this because it's pretty cool. Tying a knot in one of our garments is not just a reminder of our inherent belief in Hashem, but it is a precise expression of binding ourselves to the Torah and the Torah to us. All right, here's another piece to this from the Alter Rebbe to explain by example. If someone cautions their friend to remember something, right? So what do they say? If you have to take something with you, put your car keys on it, because that way you won't forget whatever you have to take, right? So before they had car keys, the Alter Rebbe says if you need your friend to remember something, you tie a knot on their belt as a reminder. Accordingly, the tzitzis at each corner have 5 knots, which symbolizes the 5 books of the Torah. And there are also 4 corners that whatever direction a person turns, they will remember the mitzvahs and their obligations to Hashem and to the Torah. And this is why it's so important to fulfill these mitzvahs, because it's not just enough to remember the knots, but it's important to actually enact them, because it's part of the way we bring our godliness into the world, because we're doing what Hashem wants us to do, but also the impact it has on our physical self and on our neshama is not just a visible impact, but it's also an internal impact, a spiritual impact that empowers us and strengthens us to overcome any challenge that we have. And that's why in the Shema, when we say that you should put a sign on your head, on your hand, and you should put ornaments between your eyes, it's basically, what's the sign? It's the reminder that you are connected to Hashem and that connection can never be unbroken. So what's the message to us? Number one is that our connection to Hashem is, as we learned last week, is everlasting, no matter what. Number two, Hashem gave Moshe the tools to help us ensure, to teach us and to help us ensure that we will always be able to reveal this connection and take action to make sure this connection is strong. And the stronger it is, the more it can become revealed. And the more it becomes revealed, the more the world around us will have to conform and be able to reveal godliness in the world in the way it was meant to be. And that's ultimately what brings Mashiach. So let's finalize this last piece. We don talis and tefillin during prayer in order to attach ourselves to the experience, to proactivity, encouraging our spiritual awareness, and to remind ourselves of our inherent belief in Hashem. And the key points is that through mitzvahs, through independent mitzvahs of talis and tefillin, tzitzis and tefillin is really what we're talking about, they are closely associated with davening, because davening is how we are connecting with Hashem, but the tefillin and tzitzis demonstrate the mitzvah of nodding ourselves to Hashem and reminding ourselves of our obligation to Hashem. And that way we could avoid having any mental lapse or any forgetfulness in what it is that we're here for, why we were created, what our purpose in life is, and what we should be doing, how we should be occupying our time, and of course what we shouldn't be doing. And let's hope we should reach the point that this forgetfulness will be gone, because Hashem will reveal the essence of everything and with the coming of Mashiach. So good Shabbos, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And of course, you're welcome to ask any questions.
Shabbos,
Shabbos Gedalia.